Welcome to Good Journeys with Second Mountain, the podcast that shines a spotlight on inspiring people and their inspired stories. Coming up on this episode,
I discovered a bit more love for myself. I discovered my gift, my skills. I discovered this purpose. I discovered that I was adding a huge amount of value to the world through Always Better Than Yesterday. So when there were problems in my marriage, did I go there to fix it, or did I go where I was loved? And that's exactly where I went. I spent more time in this office than I probably should have done, because that was easier. I was good. People were, my love language is words of affirmation. People were loving Ryan Hartley and all the things that he was doing. And yet I couldn't see why my own wife wasn't loving me for the same reason. But now it's obvious. She wasn't getting the version of me that everybody else was getting. Everyone else got the best of me, and my family got the rest of me.
Hello and welcome to the purpose-driven podcast, Good Journeys with Second Mountain. I'm your host and the founder of Second Mountain Comms, Ben Veal. I set up my business with one aim, to help good people do good. And with that goal firmly in mind, I'm so pleased to welcome on my guest for today's show, Ryan Hartley from Always Better Than Yesterday. Ryan is a coach, consultant, podcast host, and community builder who is driven by one overarching mission: to leave people better today than they were yesterday. He set up his company, Always Better Than Yesterday, back in 2017, and since that time has helped thousands of people worldwide to leave a heartprint and connect to a brighter future. As Chief Heart Officer and worldwide community leader of Always Better Than Yesterday, Ryan's purpose is to help build and shape a community of heart-centered leaders. His popular programs include HEARTSET, HEARTWORK and HEARTPRINT, all of which we'll cover in our conversation today, with the aim of embedding a heart-centered approach into leadership, businesses, and community building. Ryan, that's a long intro. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today. How are you, man?
Very kind of you. Yeah, great to see you, my friend.
There's a lot of hearts in your intro. A lot of hearts.
Well, you know, there's a heart in my surname, so what can I say? Maybe I was destined for this.
Absolutely, I think you were. Well, look, let's kick off with the big question, then. Always better than yesterday. What does that look like in reality to you?
Give you a little bit of context. I'm a psychology student. You know, I was the 15-year-old kid that watched far too many Wire in the Blood documentaries, you know. And I was always fascinated with why people did what they did, but also why naughty people did what they did. So I went off to university, and then I joined the local police force because I wanted to be a criminal profiler. But as soon as I joined, I quickly realized that those jobs didn't exist. You know, you have to spend your whole lifetime in academia if you want to be a criminal profiler. But I was taking 999 calls. I was dispatching officers on the radio. It was a great job. I mean, really privileged to be in, you know, people's moments of need.
Yeah, sure.
As a young lad, 21 to 24, I did that job. But it wasn't really sustainable for kind of work-life balance. And so I moved within a different role within what people might describe as the back office. So I went into the corporate development world, became an analyst. And as I journeyed by being an analyst, I got pretty good at it, got promoted a couple of times pretty quickly. And there affords you the kind of leadership development journey. Along the journey, I was offered to be trained as a coach. And I just fell in love with this idea of being able to help people. I was already, you know, being able to help the organization improve and be better through the type of work that I was doing. And I'd already journeyed around Simon Sinek Find Your Why stuff. So I'd already had a bit of clarity around why I did what I did, which was just to leave things better.
Yeah.
And then this thing called coaching helped me realize that I come alive when I'm leaving people better. I mean, it's one thing to leave processes better and performance better, but when I can leave a person better, like that was what lit me up and fulfilled me. So I started to, I was coached myself, and my coach just asked me this one question 10 times. She said, "What's important to you about being a coach?" And I think it was May 2017, I wrote the words down: "I love helping people be better than they were yesterday." I just wrote those words down, and I've never shaken them since. And a couple of months later, that became the umbrella with which I started to coach people privately. So my wife was running a network marketing company. She had like 300 women in her team. And the police weren't really using me effectively as a coach. I was only coaching people who wanted promotion or they were a problem. And you know the benefits of coaching. It's so much more than just that. So I started to coach people for free in my spare time in the evenings. And I just grew this little community of people that I'd been helping into this one place called We Are Always Better Than Yesterday. And I guess, to be honest, in the early days, being mindset driven, always better than yesterday looked like learning, improving, growing. But as I've really journeyed deeper in this, what it means to connect with your heart set and do more of your heart work, I've realized that being better isn't a requirement. It's nothing that we need to do to prove to anyone. Being better than yesterday is the result, and it's the result of love.
I've heard you talking about leading from love, not for love. Like, right. What's the difference between the two? Can you explain that?
Well, it's probably my greatest life lesson. And I was very fortunate on the podcast to interview a guy called Dr. Gary Chapman, who's the author of the 5 Love Languages. And on the final page of his Love Languages book, he's got this one-liner that kind of haunts me. It says, "For all the love that we do not receive as children, we become adults that seek that in the world." And that was me. My childhood was good, but it was one that questioned, whether I was loved. We certainly didn't use the words "I love you" in my family, and I didn't have the presence of a father. I didn't have a presence of a father figure. So I became a kid that went into the world, in my early days with a perception of being arrogant, because I would tell people all the things I was doing. I would tell people all the achievements I'd had, and I'd always reject that label of arrogance because it never felt like that was where it was coming from. And as I've grown older and reflect back on my time, I come to see that was just a young kid seeking someone's approval, seeking someone to be proud of them. So that was one way with which I was leading for love as a kid. But the real thing that brought me to my knees was that my wife and I, we've been together since 15. And we got to the point where we've been married, we've got 2 children, running businesses, and we weren't looking after each other. We weren't being who we needed to be for each other. And things came to a head, and we had to decide whether we continue or we stopped. In the build up to that, I discovered a bit more love for myself. I discovered my gift, my skills. I discovered this purpose. I discovered that I was adding a huge amount of value to the world through Always Better Than Yesterday. So when there were problems in my marriage, did I go there to fix it, or did I go where I was loved? And that's exactly where I went. I spent more time in this office than I probably should have done, because that was easier. I was good. People were, my love language is words of affirmation. But people were loving Ryan Hartley and all the things that he was doing. And yet I couldn't see why my own wife wasn't loving me for the same reason. Whereas now it's obvious. She wasn't getting the version of me that everybody else was getting. I think that you picked up on this one-liner before. Everyone else got the best of me, and my family got the rest of me. So that's what it means for me and that was a journey, 2019, luckily before the pandemic, because we probably would have killed each other had we got into lockdown together. So I describe it fortunately now, we had to break and rebuild. Ironically, that's how then God and faith has come into our marriage, not my will be done, I can assure you, but we are so much better for that firm foundation now, and we continue to kind of grow and walk in love and grace. 3 years later, or 4 years later nearly, we're stronger than ever. Doesn't mean to say that our marriage isn't an absence of conflict, but we are absolutely growing through that conflict. We're turning up for each other rather than turning in on each other. And that's because I've really personally learned how to lead from love rather than for love.
But you've had quite an interesting faith journey, haven't you? I know we've talked about that off air separately, but your kind of spirituality and your faith now, that's fairly new to you, it's fair to say, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't. And the irony is, I would never have wanted to talk about stuff like this, and I just can't deny it. There's been such a transformation within myself and my family and the people around me that I've connected with that I just can't deny this presence. But I was a man of science. I was a man of logic, and I was an analyst. I was a man of mindset, like surrendering to this man on a throne with a beard, a father image after I had my own let me down in this world. There's no way I was surrendering to a make-believe one. Do you know what I mean? Like, that just was not on my agenda. But during our struggles, my wife found God through a friend. And then she became a bit evangelical. And she was like, you need to read this. And it made things worse. It pushed me away. I was like, not a chance. I already felt lower down the hierarchy of importance. I was not bringing in some big man like to like further down the hierarchy. But in coming back together and really trying to make a go of it, she wanted to go to this Christian festival called Big Church Festival. And honestly, mate, it was like probably my worst nightmare. I thought I was going to spend time with like 20,000 Ned Flanders. Do you know what I mean? Like, because I hadn't experienced church in the way that I have now.
Yeah, of course.
It was for old people in pointy buildings. And we all walk around saying, peace be with you. You know what I mean? At the end. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't for me. That wasn't, I didn't think people like me go to things like that. But being in this festival, being able to look around and just see all walks of life, you know, all walks of life, having their moments. I'm a people watcher, right? You stick me in a coffee shop, I'm a people watcher. And that's what I was doing at this festival. I was looking around and there's people having their moments of worship, both intimate and out loud, the types of music I'd never heard before. Like, and I think God's got a sense of humor because he just played a few songs, like with the lyrics just hit me. Like, we are messengers, like, and he comes on and he talks about, you know, he is the father of the fatherless. And I'm like, that's weird. Why? Like, I'm just looking around to say, who's that message for?
Where did that come from?
Yeah. Yeah. And just like, you know, so I'd end up coming home after the festival, secretly having had a great time. And I just start listening to worship music on the way home from work. And I ended up pulling on the drive, just with tears in my eyes, just, I am a child of God. And his stuff was starting to sink into me. I was starting to believe it. But I hadn't fully accepted it at this point. And then I go into Vineyard Church. My wife had been going there a couple of weeks. The pastor used to be our school teacher. So there's a bit of familiarity about it. It was Father's Day. And he said, come on, man, come down the front. We're going to do a commissioning over you. I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I'm a father. He's going to say some nice words. And then he said, that's it, women. If you want to put your hands out towards these men, you do that. And it was like Lisa Hadoukened me in the back. In the bottom of my spine, my whole body caught fire. And I just walked back to my wife and I just said, I don't want to talk about this ever again, but I feel like a child of God. And that was 2019. And I think the benefit I had was I had a heart experience that my mind would never, ever be able to make sense of. And I don't think I'd ever have fully surrendered on this journey of faith if I hadn't had that experience and many other like it. And for me, you know, the Christian faith is, I think Jesus has always been an incredible role model for what it means to be a leader, a heart-centered leader who leads with love. Before I came to faith, he was always a character I had accepted as one of the greatest leaders of all time. Now he's my king. And now for me, it's I'm trying to walk life in a way that he did, and I find that I'm better when I do that, and I find that my marriage is better when I do that. I find that I help people better when I do that. So yeah, I think there's some incredible wisdom there.
So what does a heart-centered leader look like then? Obviously, taking, I guess, Jesus as the archetype for that. How does that kind of filter down into today's world?
Well, I'll give a bit of context, and to do that, I'll do the opposite, which is most of this Western world thinks that the leadership is hierarchy, it's rank, it's position, status. At the police, it was who had the closest parking space to the building. But so what happens is when you believe that model of leadership, as you ascend the ladder, you start to believe that you've earned the right to be served. Mm-hmm. And then in doing so, you've got to make difficult decisions to sacrifice other people. Mm-hmm. Whereas in reality, and in a heart-centered economy, in Jesus' world, he would rather serve others and sacrifice himself. And I think that's what leadership is my willingness to serve other people and sacrifice should I need to. And that's not saying lay down my life in a business world. That's saying that I'm going to put the needs of we before me. And the irony is, to do that, I need to look after myself first. You know, people think we talk about self-care and is it selfish? Well, I prefer to call it self-fullness. And in leading myself and understanding my needs, my stresses, understanding what helps me perform at my best, if I can give that to myself first, then I become more capable of overcoming that chimp response whenever the pressure is going to come. Because if that chimp response comes, what happens is it restricts the blood flow to our prefrontal cortex, meaning that my decisions become more self-centered, they become more self-focused, they become more from my primitive responses. If I can lead myself under that stress and pressure to be more calm and loving, this is where like gratitude and perspective, love, presence, breath, when I can lead myself to a state of love, I am able to look after you because I know that I have all that I need and that I'm okay. It's that analogy of, on the airplane, put your own face mask on first.
Mm-hmm.
But I was never going to do that. Like, I never used to agree with that. I thought that was ridiculous. I was always going to put my kids on first. But it's not until you're useless. There were moments in my journey where, like I say, I wasn't being who I needed to be for my kids, or I wasn't being who I needed to be for my community, or and I had to then pour into myself. And I think it's not me or you, it's me, then you. And in doing so, and this is the other part of what's for me, is what do I love? What do I love to create? Who am I at my best? So when I can connect with the essence of who I truly am, when I can be free to be more of that in the world and express that and do more of what I love, that's in part for me, because it feels great whilst I'm being that. And it feels great whilst I'm doing that. There's a reason for that, because that's in part revealing who we were made to be. But as the book of Peter says, that our gifts and our skills and our talents, they're not just for us. They're for those in the world who need it. Now, I think there's a wonderful thing when we really come to understand our own purpose, when we understand why we're here, when we understand the gifts and the skills and the talents, they're not just for us, they're for those that we need it. Because when we do that, everybody benefits. That's what I mean about HEARTPRINT. Is that when I can come to the world as the fullest expression of who I am, which is my HEARTSET, when I can serve others with what I was born to do, which is my heart work, I will inevitably leave people better. I will be better. I realized at the police that as a leader, I had the power to send people home better, not just completely drain them and get them to contribute whilst they were there. I had the opportunity to send people home better for their children, better for their partners, by the way with which I made them feel at work. Whether I stressed them, I drained them, or whether I poured into them, whether I gave them a place of purpose or meaning, and a place of belonging, and a place of work-life balance. That I was the leader of a wonderful lady who had 4 children, single parent, doing incredible things, very, very great work ethic. But would often get to that point where the stress would come of it's nearly tea time, I've not gone home yet, and I've got nothing ready. And I was like, I can influence this situation. Go home. The work will still be there tomorrow. Go home. Go look after you. And almost take that off her shoulders.
I think that's something that's lost, isn't it? Is the role that leaders can play in actually, empowering people to actually live their best lives out of the workplace. There's been this real endemic in the last few years, hasn't there, in terms of hustle culture and this feeling that luckily COVID has had somewhat of an impact on that, but this whole presenteeism piece of being at your desk from 8 till 6 and first one in, last one out. And actually, as you say, that's fine, great for your career ladder, not so great for family. And hopefully we're starting to get to a bit more of a point, both males and females alike, but actually we are starting to move towards a better place of balance within the home.
Well, like I said, about the who gets the best of you, who gets the rest of you. The other thing that's hidden in plain sight is that many people think that we are successful beyond the home. Many people are successful at the expense of the home. And, particularly men that journey, whether it be the corporate lad, actually, I don't know. Maybe I'll take that back. Maybe it's not just men. Any human being that is drawn out of the home for significant periods of the time, yes, they might be providing, but when I've come to realize how quick my kids have grown, there's this little time period, the 23rd of March, 2020, the first lockdown, right? That's a date in time that almost I look at pictures before and after. I'm like, wow, my kids have grown significantly in that time. And, for anybody listening, you intuitively know you don't get that time back. You intuitively know that actually work is probably less important than being present for your children. And there's something about culture that lures us out, that says, hey, bigger, better, more. And it's a lie and it's a fallacy. And, one of the controversial opinions I've had in the last couple of years, I'm still trying to work my head around, is that I don't want more women in senior leadership. And I caveat that if it means their family suffers. And I think the same's true of men. So there's a lot of narrative that says, encouraging women to get back into the work, to get, to have equality and to have all these positions. I have a heart for that, of course. But my priority in, I think, the value of a nuclear family that it provides the rest of society is irreplaceable. And I only wish that culture puts such an admiration and an adoration to anyone who is pouring into their family first. If women felt like being a mother was such an incredible gift to civilization, if she was celebrated and adored, not have social media and the amount of pressure on women to get back to some sort of figure after having a baby, all the pressure that's been put on by the media. Well, what if motherhood was celebrated? What if fatherhood was celebrated? Would we see a desire to be more of that rather than culture? Because here's the thing, heart-centered is coming to the world knowing that you lack nothing and that you have all that you need. And it's counterculture because the Western world only works with commercialism and capitalism by making us consumers. And the only reason it makes us consumers is because it first gives us the feeling and the belief that we lack something in some way. Ryan Hartley, in his book, Lost Connections, he interviewed a marketing executive of a very prominent company. And this marketing exec said, our marketing is at its most effective when people are left to feel inadequate without our products. Now, we've got a world of people growing up feeling like they're lacking and inadequate, and they're using consumerism to fill that void. I think this is probably one of the first mountains when you come to realize that I don't need these things. They're not, I'm being trapped by the people I'm surrounded with, the possessions I have, and it's a lie. And so
we see from, I was giving a talk recently, we see on average 4,000 marketing messages a day as consumers. It's insane. You can't avoid it. It's everywhere. And especially since we've become such habitual smartphone users and, for people like you and I who use social media quite significantly for the work we do, in the process of doing that, we're going to be barraged with multiple adverts every single day telling us that we are lacking something, 100%. And it's so hard to avoid it. I mean, I'm really interested to circle back to the point you mentioned about providing for the household, because that's been a big one for me. I think when I was climbing up the PR ladder and out of the house a long time, and I'd allowed unintentionally our family dynamic to become that very kind of classic scenario of man goes out to work all day and provide. And my wife had to pick up so much slack in that time. But I always did it thinking, well, I'm providing financially, I'm paying this mortgage, I'm buying all these things. And it was only when that was stripped away from me in 2020 that I suddenly realized that I wasn't actually provided anything that the family really needed. And it was ironically only when I lost a huge amount of my own personal finances that I realized we didn't need the amount that society tells you need, because we weren't coming from a place of lack anymore. What does provision look like for you?
The first thing is for anybody that's listening to consider the same question, because I don't think there's an enemy of any of this stuff if it's intentional and if it's chosen and it's collaborative and it's teamwork. Whereas a lot of the Western world just fall into this belief that that's what I need to do, and it's almost it breeds resentment on both parts. One partner wants to do more work, one partner wants to do less work, and there's no true love and appreciation for what each other is contributing. If you get to a point where there's an intentional conversation that says this is both what we're going to sacrifice, so the man's going to sacrifice time with the child and the woman might sacrifice a bit of her career, if that's an intentional conscious decision, great, because there's collaboration and there's commitment and there's teamwork. But that's not the way that most work. We go through it based on what we think we should do. And we both end up resenting or feeling like we're missing out in some way. So for me, provision as a man, as a father, is at this point is two things. One is to run the pay the bills. But secondly is, and we journeyed with this in the Good Father stuff. At some point, my kids are going to walk out of this house with their suitcases, a metaphorical suitcase of everything that I've equipped them with. So my provision to them is about how do I help them grow as people? How am I pouring into them as human beings? What am I providing them in terms of a sense of who they are, what they're good at, what do they love? how that we see the world, identity, because I interviewed a wonderful guy called Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who wrote a book called Hold On to Your Kids with Gabor Mate. And in it, it says that if we don't equip our kids with a sense of values and identity, they will learn it from the world. So if we're not pouring in and we're not providing for our children in terms of this sense of identity and family unit, well, then they'll be learning it from TikTok and YouTube and their peers. And for me, that's as important as the financial provision that I provide, because, and this is, just to really hone this point in, I'm not anti anybody going out into the workplace and succeeding, but what a absolute travesty if the children that we have, they only get one mum and dad. Like, they only get one mum and dad. These are the most important people in their lives. And I think for a true heartprint, someone said on my podcast recently, their heartprint is their children. If anything comes from their life, that if their children can go on and make a wonderful impact in their life, then they'll be more than happy. And I think that's the same as these two children are going to impact 80,000 people in their lifetime each. Now, what a contribution to society that is. Forget my work. My work could be forgotten at some point.
Yeah.
But what we do for others and then what they go on to do will be remembered forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You're saying about how quickly time passes, and that date in time that we'll never forget during to kick off the first lockdown. I mean, I just look at how quickly my boys have grown.
Yeah,
and it's startling. And if I could have one thing, if I could have a do-over for like the first 5 years of my older son's life and just make so many different decisions, then I would, but I can't.
But you can't.
I'm grateful that I kind of have been on a journey the last few years to at least move towards being the father that I want to be, and I feel like I'm a lot closer now than I was. You touched on it briefly, but we did a program together.
Yep.
You, me, and a bunch of other dads from around the world. This Good Fathers program where we kind of explored different elements of fatherhood, and it was a very vulnerable and cathartic and raw journey for all of us, and I think it's left a real mark. What led to you being drawn to? Because again, it's quite countercultural, that kind of let's be a good father, but let's unpick the journey. What led to you kind of deciding to put that program out into the world, and then what you're doing now with this Akira program, if you want to talk about that as well?
Okay, mate. Yeah, thank you. Well, for me, again, single parent family, very notably grew up with an absence of a male role model in the home. And I've always then thrown that into wanting to be the best dad I can be for my children. And then as I both continue as a parent and as a coach and a leader, the two paths kind of converge. So I've always been bringing good people together around heart-centered journeys. But as the way of the world is, 90% of my members would be women. I think when we talk about heart, obviously the cue to join up for those sorts of things are less filled with men, shall we say. But, and as I journeyed with parenting, and the really strange thing that happened for me is the more present I became for my children, the better I became for my children, the more it revealed the absence of that for myself. So I'm here in my 30s starting to grieve something I didn't know that I didn't have. And it really kind of then made me think about, how much I'd pulled myself through this journey, a degree of vulnerability, because there's nothing so undeniably my responsibility. And yet I just felt hugely unequipped for. I had no role model. I had no kind of vision around what good looked like. I'd only had this essence of what I didn't want to do, which is helpful but not practical, right?
Yeah.
I know the path I don't want to take, but what path? So, I've been very I'm a confident guy. Like my wife will always she'll ask me a question, I'll give the answer confidently, and then she'll realize that maybe I was just winging it. Do you know what I mean? I've always had this air of confidence. So I've applied that because I guess that's rooted in I'll figure it out. And I guess I've applied the same to parenting. I'll figure it out. And so I've spent so much time and energy and effort learning how to be the best dad I can be. And I just know that many other good men out there, I think, we have conversations, many other good men, that they either, a lot of this generation have issues with their own upbringings themselves. Maybe there's the battle of the world of parenting and being a good teammate. There's the battle of what does it mean to connect with my heart, and what does that mean, in a world that's been conditioned out of theirs. the battle between provision and presence. So I started to see these regular kind of topics and these ideas. And I thought, now's the time. I got to that point where I've been running a group in general for 3 years. I just felt that was the time called to bring good men together, not because I'm an expert of what it means to be a good father, but because I'm good at bringing good people together and having them reflect. Like, my job was not to teach people how to be a good father, but to reflect, to share stories, to share experiences, and ultimately,
yeah. I mean, I would, if you don't mind me jumping in there, but I would say your real skill, Ryan, is you're really good at asking for questions.
Right, and in asking those questions, you come to new insights and realizations that hopefully lead to a 1% degree of change in terms of the way we show up and behave. And that's one degree of possibility that in that conversation, maybe things will be different. And if things are different in this situation, which then leads to a greater possibility in the next, that's what blows my mind when it comes to HEARTPRINT and ripple effect.
So do you want to talk to me a bit, Ben, about the kind of 3 facets? So HEARTPRINT, HEARTSET, and HEARTMIND. I got that right? No, HEARTSET, HEARTWORK, and HEARTPRINT. There you go.
Well, like I say, let's start with HEARTSET. I was a mindset coach. I was a psychology student. I was a mindset coach. But I was working with concepts of values and purpose and mission and vision. I was like, I don't think these are products of the mind. How many organizations have, wrote their values on a wall and yet they're just not lived? How many marketing agencies have intellectually crafted their purpose statement and their mission statements rather than, really connecting with that something with which is deeper? And for me, that's where I call it HEARTSET. And I developed this model over my shoulder. I'm pointing to it if you can't see, but it's a circular model, very similar to the Simon Sinek, but it's HEARTSET at the very core. Then mindset, then skill set, and then community. This was the model that I thought I developed, right? This is Ryan Hartley's model for the world. Yep. And then I'm reading the book of Mark and it says, go love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength, and go love your neighbor. I was like, like, this model's 2,000 years old. Yeah. But for me, it's rooted in wisdom. It's rooted in wisdom that just says that actually neither is more important, but there's an ordering. If I can connect to my HEARTSET, which is who I am, what I stand for, what I care about, then I can hand that over to my mindset, which at its best is logic, it's logic, it's rational, it's strategic, it's planning, it's learning. So it can figure out the best way of bringing my heart to the world. And then I can use my skill set as the vehicle and as the mechanism to deliver that. And then my community are the ones that benefit from it. So if I align my life by being who I love, doing more of what I love for those that I love, then that's where I, as a human being, transform from the inside. I realize that I have something that is useful, that is worth something, that is making a difference. I feel fulfilled because I'm an expression of myself rather than a exterior definition of what the world believes me to be. So that's HEARTSET. One of the things I really want to touch on the HEARTSET element is that it's about our purpose. And I think there are 3 pathways to purpose. Passion. Obviously, we said earlier, passion is about, when Peter says that our gifts and skills and talents, they're for those in the world who need it. So passion becomes purpose when we use it to serve others. I think pain is another pathway to purpose. And in the scripture where Paul is pleading to God to remove the thorns from his flesh, in the Passion translation, God simply responds, in your weakness, you will find my full expression. So I think anyone that can connect with their pain and use that for good, and use that to help others through that pain or avoid that pain, I think that feels very purposeful. And the last pathway, I think, is possibility. When we start to really understand the possibilities that we create for those that we serve, and then the possibilities those people create for other people, there's a huge amount of purpose in that. So there's 3 pathways to purpose. I know you love a bit of purpose, so I thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that. I mean, you're 6 years into this journey now of always better than yesterday, coming from this kind of kernel of an idea when you're in a very different stage of life. And when you've obviously, I mean, I talk a lot about mountains. You've definitely gone through your valley on route to where you are now. Does it surprise you where you are now in terms of how much this community has grown and how many kind of lives you're impacting through this community that you've kind of built? Well, yes and no. No, because at the very start, a lot of the coaching and online space is very, hey, if you dream it, you can do it. If you can visualize it,
visualize everything. So I fell into that trap. I started to visualizing stadiums full of people, and it was somewhere along the journey I was like, I don't need that. Like that's not important. That's taking me away from the practical element of today. And so paradoxically, I've come away from that need for any of that. And I guess I just leave space for miracles. And for me, 2018 version of me would look at me and go, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Because we are mindset, we are driven, we are hardworking, we will work our face off, we will build whatever it is that we know that we're capable of. And now I'm more kind of Chinese philosophy Wu Wei, which is the art of not forcing stuff. Because I trust that if I show up in this moment, walking in love, being an example, being a servant, then I've learned to trust to walk that path, that I will be provided all that I need, that God will send people my way who need whatever it is. We're all fractal expressions of God. That's what it means to be the body of Christ, I think. We're like a mosaic of 8 billion pieces. And I've come to realize that I have the humility to realize I am just but one piece, but also the responsibility to know that there is none like me. And my only responsibility is to place myself where I should be. Because if I don't, the big picture remains incomplete. And those who need me don't get to receive me.
Absolutely. And talking about kind of universe connections and being placed where you're supposed to be placed. I mean, so, the only reason that we're here recording this right now is because we were at a friend, our joint friend Ben's barbecue about a year ago to celebrate a birthday. I spotted this chap from a distance wearing a baseball cap with 3 distinctive green lights on it. Yeah. And I instantly knew what that was because I'd read this book in the middle of COVID called Green Lights by the actor Matthew McConaughey. And it was a book that massively touched me because it was much more than a memoir, much more of a kind of manifesto for purpose-driven life and living life to the fullest, really. So I did something I don't usually do, got up and introduced myself to a stranger, started this conversation. Within minutes, said stranger, says, oh yeah, I had Matthew McConaughey on my podcast, which opened up a conversation. That was you. How does it come about having someone like Matthew McConaughey on your podcast? I guess it's a question.
So this is one of what we've literally just been talking about. This story is probably one of the biggest things that have helped shape that because, I got to a point where I'd interviewed a few world-class people back-to-back. So I did episode 112, 13, 14. They were pretty much back-to-back world-class. Likes of Dr. Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages. The likes of John Gordon, who's written like 23 bestsellers on leadership. So I'd had some world-class people. And I thought, I really need to start improving my booking process because I was literally I think I'd got really good at inviting people. And then the grace I'd earned when I'd send them a really long hyperlink, which is app.acuityscheduling. And I thought, I need to start improving my processes. So I did a landing page, did a web page and a booking link embedded within that. And then I also have always kept a tab on my a notes page, which is just interview potentials, the people I'd love to interview. I think I'd already interviewed 112 people at this point, so I'd already got really good at knowing the types of people that I'd liked but again, the same thing with Green Lights. Absolutely loved hearing. I listened to the audiobook. It's incredible because he reads it himself. It's just something else. But also that his words at his Oscar-winning speech impacted my life. When he talks about his hero is himself in 10 years' time. At a time when I didn't have a hero in my life, that was something that gave me incredible heart and confidence because that's how I felt. My hero was me. I was showing up for me. So to be able to get in a conversation and thank him for the words that have impacted my life was just so surreal. I'm a young lad from Trowbridge, southwest England. It was never lost on me what it was like to have a conversation with an Oscar winner. And yet, paradoxically, he is just a human being. So I had this list. He was top of that list. I did my research. I messaged his PR agent, who represented a number of other people. So she also represented a lady called Jamila Jamil. And I just messaged this PR agent and I said, I'd love to have a conversation with your clients, Jamila, for these reasons, Matthew, for these reasons. Here's a little bit about the podcast. Appreciate it. And I was on a Zoom call. And I had this email back 2 hours later. And it just says this. Hi, Ryan. Jamila's busy, but Matthew's free. I walked downstairs and I think...
What have I done?
I walked downstairs and I said to Lisa, I think Matthew's agent's just agreed for him to come on my podcast. And then because she was negotiating a calendar time with me and didn't use my booking link, I was like, Lisa, I don't know if this is real. I don't know if this is pulling my leg. I don't know if I've got the wrong email address. Because it wasn't booked in my calendar, my mind was doing all sorts of silly things. Oh, this is too good.
She's not following the process.
Right. She wasn't following my process, but I knew enough about The Secret. I knew enough about manifestation that I didn't want my mindset to be, oh, this isn't happening. So I wanted to keep that spirit of belief that, okay, this is happening. Cool. And my heart rate probably didn't return to normal for 2 weeks. And then I got an email the day of the Super Bowl. I'm sorry, Matthew's not going to be able to make the podcast tomorrow. I was like, so I could see that on the very front line of so I hadn't read the full message. So my heart's going, my tummy's going. I just walk off to the toilet. I needed to be away from my family. I needed to read this in private because I've been talking about this for 2 weeks. The whole world knew at this point. She said, I'm sorry, Matthew can't come on the podcast, but you can do Thursday if you're available. I was like, yes, come on, it's happening. And then she said, if you can talk about this, this, and this whilst he's on, that'd be really helpful. I was like, this is on. This is on. And there's something quite surreal about sitting here at 10 o'clock in your office at night, heartbeat blasting at your chest, and then seeing Matthew McConaughey wants to join your Zoom room. But we had an incredible conversation. I was expecting 30 minutes with him. I would think I went about 45. Very, very gracious, incredible talk before air and off air. He invited me over to Austin to go and watch the football. He didn't need to do that. He's an incredibly gracious guy. I truly believe that he meant it. I don't believe he just flippantly said it. I truly believe that he's that kind of guy. So the realization that he might be an Oscar winner, but he's a human being. And for me as a podcaster, that was front and center of my planning, my preparation. I mean, I sat and watched a lot of his movies. I sat and read his book again. Like, I did a lot of prep.
Not bad research to do, to be fair, is it?
No, it was good. It was really good. And I
say to your wife, sorry, I'm doing podcast research tonight. I can't possibly do anything else.
No, she was happy. We watched How to Lose. Is it 10 Things I Hate About You?
That's one of those wonderful kind of serendipitous moments, isn't it? Where you say to your wife, I'm really sorry, but for work, we need to watch back-to-back Matthew McConaughey movies. I'm really sorry to do this to you. She's like, that's okay. I'll do this for you because I love you.
100%. Yeah, what a servant she is. And but it was incredible, that moment. And, you know, I think the greatest compliment I've had about that show, anybody that's watched it, they're like, looks like two mates having a chat. And that was what I tried to do. I've watched so many of his interviews where the interviewer is just so, I guess what you would just say, out of the box questions. And, you know, I wanted to create a personal experience. I wanted to leave a heartprint on him and at least make him feel like he'd had a good, fun experience. Yeah. So I shook it up a little bit. I did a few little funny things and I got my guitar out at the end.
I remember. Yeah.
And there was so he sang a song in Magic Mike. It's called Ladies of Tampa. And Lisa was like, I was just joking with Lisa in the build-up, saying, I'm going to do it. I'm going to invite him to sing it. And then I nearly bottled it. I just thought, do you know what? I'm going to do it. I said, Matthew, should we sing? And I basically strummed the A chord, and that was it. And he sang a few words, and it's surreal. Like you said. But
forever can say you've jammed with Matthew McConaughey, can't you?
Sure. But the way you started this piece of the conversation was about, you know, the surreal nature. And for me, this is what has driven me to really truly believe in this leaving space for miracles. Because I think 2018 version of me would have thought I could have figured this out, made it happen, and continue to build better. But the reality is I don't think I could. I wasn't in control of making this happen. Yes, I had to do 112 interviews before, and, you know, yes, I had to craft the email. Yes, I had to build the brand. But I don't know why his publicist said yes. I don't think my audience was big enough.
The point was, if you had gone into doing what you're doing, saying, my goal for doing this podcast and my goal for building this community is because I want to reach these kind of caliber guests, because I want to do X, Y, and Z, because I want to be famous and have this huge reach, become a YouTube star, etc. It wouldn't happen. And I think there's so much of that in purpose-driven life is in terms of unlocking that core purpose for why you're doing anything. Yeah. And if it is because you are aspiring for first mountain, status, money, achievement, all those kind of things we talked about earlier on, you'll never truly be successful. It's only when I think you lose yourself in the process and start to have fun with it, as you say. Like I have great fun doing this. I describe doing this podcast for me as a green light. It's something that it brings me joy. It brings me creative fun. I love these conversations. I love having the ability to connect with different people from all over the world. Without this as a vehicle, I wouldn't have it. I wouldn't have that ability. And that's something I've loved kind of following your journey. I mean, yes, you had an Oscar winner on, but he's one of over 200 guests. You've recorded 900 odd episodes. You're in, was it over 140 countries you'll listen to? I mean, what do you think's been at the heart of why the podcast has resonated so deeply with so many?
Good question. Well, I truly believe that when we connect with our purpose and when we connect with our heart, if we do what you're doing, which is send out that Batman signal of, hey, this is how I choose to express myself, it will always resonate with those who need it. So I don't think necessarily people resonate with me or any of those things other than the fact it shows that this is something that the world needs. More heart in the world, a more loving, kind, compassionate style of leadership, a culture where people aren't made to feel like they lack or they only belong if they choose to fit in and present the best side of themselves. I think what I represent is a couple of things. The willingness to learn and be curious and share good people with good people. I think there's always a space for that. And obviously it's helped having some relatively big guests along the way that then kind of taps you into another network of, how I became top 10 in Peru is beyond me. It's far beyond my control. I don't know anyone in Peru. And yet one of my episodes was the top 10 listened to episode in Peru. Makes no sense to me.
You need to get that made up as a t-shirt, don't you?
Yeah, top 10 in Peru. But there's other countries where I've hit, where they've played it, and I hope the way that I'm coming across is one of, I'm amazed by it. It baffles me. It's beyond my intellect. Sadhguru says, I hope your dreams don't come true, for your dreams are limited for what you can only imagine. I hope that greater things happen for you than you can ever imagine. And that's what I feel like I'm living, because my dreams were limited by what I could imagine. The stage, other people have done those things. So should I do that if that was what success means? Whereas for me, I'm trying now just to show up in love and do more of what I love and help people in love. And it's becoming apparent that not everybody wants it, because you've seen some of the comments. Someone commented on one of my reels the other day, what load of bollocks this is. It doesn't mean to say that everybody loves it. It just means to say that the more I keep showing up, the more people who already need it are able to find it.
Do you find that you have any? I'm curious this, because I mean I've kind of followed. I've obviously only followed your journey for a year, 18 months or so, but we've known one another. But I've since learned quite a lot about your journey, and you've shown me some wonderful photos of kind of where you were, even with this same program maybe 5 years ago, and it's a very different Ryan Hartley. It's short cropped hair. It suits, it's corporate speak, and it's very much you clearly trying to align this hope for a future Ryan Hartley with the Ryan Hartley that you were at that moment in time in a corporate environment. Mm-hmm. Are you still connected to some of the people that maybe you worked with when you were a different version of yourself? And have you had any pushback in terms of, because I have, I've brought myself, having been very corporate for 15 years, I'm now far more casual, far more vulnerable, far more authentic in my Second Mountain work. Have you had any pushback from people in terms of where you are now?
I did a lot. So when I was still in the police, I was doing this thing called Always Better Than Yesterday, probably for about 3 years on the side, as a passion project. As a love for it, a love for leadership. So I'd share my views and opinions, and so I was being considered for a senior leadership program, development program. And as they were considering my position on that program, the senior leaders sat around with my social media profile. What the fuck does Ryan Hartley know about leadership was the words that got back to me. So that was a period of my life where I hadn't quite gone through this healing journey, and it brought up all loads of traumas that I didn't know I had, which is this need to fit in and belong, this need to feel like I'm safe and like I belong. And the gift I was given is that I didn't feel that. I felt the opposite of it, and I felt judged. And I felt like I couldn't. I got two values. One is belonging, but also authenticity. And I didn't feel like I could truly belong and be authentic, because it was just fitting in. They only wanted a certain corporate version of me. And I probably wasn't mature enough to be able to, I was still going on this journey of still needing stuff from other people. So I just couldn't stay. I think the freedom that I've experienced since leaving means that so when I was there, I felt like I needed to convince people that at least Ryan Hartley was onto something. It was good ideas. He's a good guy. He meant well. I don't need anything from anybody at the moment. And I think the reward for me is the fact that I've been able to pay my mortgage for 3 years using this business that I've created, do the dog walk every single morning, walk the dogs to school every single morning, to work with people that I thoroughly enjoy being in the corner of. So yeah, every now and again I'll get a comment, but they don't even come close because I don't need anything. And this is the journey of faith. I know who I am. I know what I stand for. I know what I care about. And I know that if that's not for you, then it's not for you. And if you're making judgments and opinions about me, then great. What a waste of energy. Direct that into something more useful, constructive, and positive. But I'm at peace. I think whether it be my long hair or just my 8 presents, I am at more peace now, age 35, in my marriage, in my fatherhood, in my health and my well-being, in my business, than I've ever been.
I love it. And I think, it's all about that kind of definition of success, isn't it? I mean, I'm the same. Like, my job now is being able to take the kids to school every day. I pick them up every day, being at home, being able to work my schedule around family. And there's just so much peace that comes from that. And I wish I'd had that perspective years ago, but I'm so glad I've got it before it's too late. And I'm so glad I'm not doing this when my children are grown up saying, I wish I hadn't missed all of their childhood.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all I can hope in that ripple effect is I'm hopefully showing a model to my boys that they will take 10 steps further and they'll have this stuff nailed, because I can have open, vulnerable conversations with them and say, when your baby's first born, don't do this. Don't do this.
Well, and I think, so I've often said in the past, if it costs you your values, it will cost you your peace. If you're not living your values, it will cost you your peace. So then the inverse of that is that if we are living our values, then we will be at peace. And I think that's the hallmark of the second mountain, isn't it? Right? We've ditched the values of society and have started to come to the world as an expression of what's truly important to us. And the result isn't. So this is the way the Western culture gets things wrong. And Sadhguru says that America will never be the happiest country on the planet because they're in the pursuit of happiness. And the pursuit of anything first has to reveal its absence. And the Western world wants to pursue happiness. Whereas actually the true essence or spirit that we should be seeking is peace. I'd take peace over happiness any day. And that comes when we live our values.
Yeah, and we're not really a peaceful society, are we? I mean, again, it's kind of baked into that feeling of lacking, isn't it? Right. But we're always trying to search for something. We're always after something more. One of the things I was going to ask you was, you've built this community of always better than yesterday, and that's a fantastic goal to aspire towards. But we're also human beings, and we're also infallible, and we make mistakes and we make bad decisions. When you make a mistake and take a step backwards, like, what do you do to pick yourself up?
Well, I've learned to give myself a lot of grace. I've learned that I am a human being and human beings are flawed and fallible. And this idea of compassion, com means to be with and passion means to suffer. So when I can be with myself in that suffering, understand what's happened, why I've behaved the way I've behaved, what caused it, where it comes from, then I can love myself through it. Rather than feeling guilty or shame or judge or criticize, I can give myself space and grace and go, okay, cool. How can we learn from this? How can we use this for good? How can we just move forward? And how can we take whatever's happened? We can't change it. And how do we ultimately asking the question? Well, how do I want to move forward? How do I want to be in this moment? If that's not who I wanted to be, well, who do I want to be? And be more intentional. But I don't think a heart-centered life is one without struggle, challenge, and mistakes. But I think it's one that we are able to come back to who we are much quicker.
I think the last thing I'd kind of like to touch on really is, going back to where we started with this, building a heart-centered life and being a heart-centered leader. I mean, what are some of the kind of positive routines and structures that you've put in place personally over the last few years to help keep you moving forward in the right direction? And are there any kind of practical, I know this is very subjective, but are there any practical takeaways that you can maybe give our audience today to maybe look at life in a slightly different way?
Well, 100% go and explore your heart set. Go and get clear on who you are, what you stand for, what you care about, what your values, what your gifts and your skills and your strengths and your talents. You start to put that on a page, you'll start to see yourself different. And then you have the accountability to walk as that person. But in terms of coming back to being a heart-centered leader, when stress and pressure hits, because inevitably life will, it's about trying to create coherence between your heart and your mind. So there's this wonderful work by the Heart Math Institute that says when we are stressed, when our body and our mind and our heart are not on the same page. The brain waves and the heart waves, they are irregular. And that's a sign that we're, maybe stressed or not handling things. One of the best ways to bring ourselves back into coherence is breath, is learning how to slow breath, getting into nature, calming. So what that will do is it will realign the heart and brain waves at the level of the body. Everything will be in alignment, which will then give you back access to prefrontal cortex, because cortisol is no longer flowing through your body. So you'll become more logical, rational, and a good human being, but able to make better decisions. The irony is they call it Headspace, the app. It's not Headspace, it's Heart Connection. So if you can create Heart Connection, which is in this moment, I am good, I have all that I need, I'm grateful for whatever it is that I'm about to do. That heart connection then tells the body, go and release more oxytocin rather than cortisol, meaning that the production of oxytocin inhibits the production of cortisol, literally meaning perfect love casts out fear, right? That's the irony of science and the Bible. When we are in a state of love, when we come back to loving who we are, what we have, what we get to do, who we get to do it with, being grateful for the opportunity, we just operate on a different level, different spirit, getting back access to all that. So getting in some solitude practices, getting in some connection practices, whatever they might be. For me, I'm a better human being when I get up early and I have that time to myself. If I do physical exercise, if I do breath work, meditation, or ice baths, yes, there's an element of doing what's doing what's uncomfortable, but I think that acts as a circuit switch and a reset. Because I think the way that we live at the moment, we're getting constant drips of cortisol, just micro stressors. The Wi-Fi's not working, the traffic, there's no cereal left, the bread's gone. Like, all those things are micro stressors where we're getting drips of cortisol. If we can do something difficult, particularly as men, that can just reset that switch, a cold shower, on the other side of that becomes wonderful freedom, becomes wonderful energy, and our ability to know that whatever stress comes our way, we can work our way through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question is a podcast. 200 odd episodes, or 200 odd guests, 900 odd episodes. If someone's coming new to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast, couple of episodes that you would suggest as a good starting point?
Yeah, I don't know. I had my son on episode, I think 46 or 47.
Oh wow,
that was an incredible episode.
What was that like?
He was 6 at the time. And the wonderful thing is, and this is why it was never about interviewing Hollywood actors to begin with, because that was probably one of my favorite episodes, because he just shared some absolute wisdom as a 6-year-old. And I think adults hearing from a 6-year-old, it really brought a lot of things back into focus that just says, actually, do you know what? If Corey at the age of 6 is saying these things, then maybe, because I don't think, you and I might get inspired by Simon Sinek or Tony Robbins or whoever, but there's something more practical about being connected with that human being and knowing them locally and going, oh, wow. So Corey, I think, is episode 46, 47.
I need to check that one out. It's amazing.
Yeah, I need to have him back on. Over the years, I've had one of my mentors, John Gordon, episode 77, who wrote a wonderful book called The Energy Burst and The Garden and loads of great books. Dr. Vanessa Lapointe, she was on recently. I think she was 201. She's a parenting expert, incredible parenting expert. Dr. Gordon Neufeld, again, similar parenting perspectives. And obviously Matthew McConaughey, I think, was 116.
I love it. You just got these numbers in your head, indelibly etched.
Yeah. Well, you might find that they're wrong, but I've been fortunate enough to speak with what I've recorded. 217 will go out tomorrow. So it's people are, when you said, do you see it can grow? Well, I just hope to be an example of what's possible when you just do what you love and you just don't stop. I think that's my secret. I've been consistent, and as a creator, you get to define what consistency means. And for me, that's been weekly. So I've done one a week. And then over the pandemic, I started to then share some insights from my heart and my mind on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, which has been great for my creative expression. Like, a lot of creators wait for clarity before they create. The amount of clarity I've gained by just creating, by doing 4 episodes a week personally for 2 years, that's how I've been able to create such clarity with the way I speak on my website. Because I've been talking these ideas and refining them for so long. It's a gift to other people, but it's a massive gift to me too. Lisa's often asked, what's the ROI of your website? What's the ROI of your podcast? Sorry. I don't know. I can't tell you the metrics, but I can tell you that I speak with confidence about these things. I can tell you I've spoken with an Oscar winner. I can tell you that the majority of my clients have at least some way been involved in the podcast. I can tell you that I'm being invited to places and spaces that I probably wouldn't be if I hadn't have done these things. So I don't know the ROI, but all I know is that I'm better for it, and hopefully so are a lot of other people who tune in.
Absolutely. Well, look, where can people connect with you after listening today? What are your socials?
Thank you. Well, the website is simple. It's abty.co.uk. That's got the link to, there's a tab on there called Our Greenhouse, which is a link to all of the environments that we've created which help people grow. So that will be our Facebook, that will be our YouTube, that will be our group programs like our Master Heart and Mind and our Akira. Just come and spend time in our... If you're on Facebook, in our We Are Always Better Than Yesterday Facebook group, because ultimately that's the space of the internet where we hope that you come and just you leave a little bit better. You know, a lot of the internet isn't always good for us, but we hope to be that space and place where you're going to come and connect with good people, and all things might become possible.
Absolutely, man. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me today, Ryan. Thank you for the role that you have played in my journey, continuing to play in my journey. It's a privilege to know you and privilege to kind of be part of this community with you. Thank you to everyone who's listened into today. I really hope you've taken away something from this conversation. Please do check out Ryan's work and the Always Better Than Yesterday community. And if it resonates with you, then I'm sure Ryan would love to hear from you. In terms of today's show, it'd be great if you could let us know what you think using the hashtag GoodJourneysPod. You can find all past episodes via our YouTube channel. So if you're listening today, you can watch this in full video and see Ryan's lovely, long, luxurious hair, but also all my past guests sharing their inspiring stories. So that is it for another episode of the Good Journeys Pod. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, let's keep climbing together, and I'll see you all again very soon.